I noticed that there are a BlackBerry and a pair of glasses up here. So if anyone's left them and needs them if you're going, please let me know. Great to be with you this morning. And first of all, before I get into the presentation, I just want to thank the guys at ATEC, Jen, and the team for giving me this opportunity to come here and speak to you today. What I really want to do today is to give you some insight into where we are and the trends in our industry that are going to move us forward and drive us forward. Personally, I believe we've reached a fork in the road. And in the future, it's going to be up to you guys to decide which way or how you actually go as you reach this fork in the road. Presentation today, I've given it a title. I don't always give it a title, but I think it's important. I've called it Facing Up to Reality and Opportunity. There's changes, dramatic and rapid changes happening in our industry. So what I want to do is to show you the why and the wherefore in relation to that. I think really what we should do now, as we know it's been a tough time the last couple of years, but let's have a look at the global economies. Let's just see what's shaping our future right now. This is this graph was put together by the IMF, and it shows world key economies in 2005. You'll notice that the key driver was the United States, followed by Europe. Now, we've gone through the GFC, or we're going through the GFC, and it seemed to hit us pretty hard, and we didn't see it coming. But maybe we should have seen it coming. If you look at this IMF data map of 2007, you'll notice that the world looks pretty brown, with the exception of a couple of regions. That's North America and Central Europe. And green basically means, or represents, the fact that their economies have stalled. If we move it forward a couple of years, 2009, you'll see that the whole world economy has stalled. We're basically in recession. With the exception of one or a couple of markets, China was still trading at plus 10% during this period. And we see other areas like India and some of the other Asian regions that are still performing much better than the rest of the world. So we know that European economies are failing. We see it with Portugal, with Spain, with Greece, etc. Only last week, the UK announced that they were officially in recession. So although we're seeing good numbers from some of these markets, from the youth market, for those of you who've been maybe to the UK, as you can tell I'm a POM, it's a pretty depressed state. And I think if I had the opportunity to travel somewhere during this period, I'd jump on a plane too and go somewhere where the sun shines. We see political uncertainty. All this is fueling increasing social unrest. When people have doubts, when people have fears, they want to hit back. And we're seeing this more and more, not just in Europe, but around the world. The US, where this started to happen, where this whole thing started to occur, continues to struggle. The US economy has been in free fall recently. The dollar is on oxygen. We've got a US presidential election, and what happens when we go through things like elections? Again, people stop traveling because they're not sure how they're going to emerge at the other end. Will Obama get in? Will somebody else get in? Who knows? So again, it tends to impact outbound tourists. In a recent intelligence report from Experian, it said perceptions and beliefs are becoming far more important to the real activity of the economy than ever before. Perceptions and beliefs. This is what's driving the economies right now. And it's fear. People have lost their jobs, their houses, their security, everything that makes them who they are. So there's an undercurrent of fear that is now driving various economies around the world. In contrast, we're doing okay. You know, we've got a strong dollar, but this is eroding our exports, including travel. We're now an expensive destination to visit. The high cost of oil. When you look at oil, and you look at this graph here, you'll see that in 2008, when the oil spiked, it was $147 a barrel. But we're not buying oil. We're buying kerosene. And you'll see that there is about $182 a barrel during that period. And if you look at that arrow there right now, you'll see from 2010 just how quickly the oil has risen again. So the high cost of oil is with us for the long term. European carbon tax. Here's another one. God, it gets worse, doesn't it? We've got the UK APD. You know, what's the average price for a family now? £500? Sorry, £500 for a family of four. We've got the ETS from Europe. But we also have our own government doing it. I think, was it last week or is it this week that they're putting the departure tax up to $60? So again, all this adds to the cost of a ticket from some of our key traditional markets to come into this part of the world. All this then is going to fuel a change. People are going to look at price and choice, and that's going to have much more influence in the future. If you look at this image here, this is a route network of EasyJet. I'm sure some of you have heard of EasyJet. It's one of the low-cost carriers in the UK. This is not their entire route network. This is just from Gatwick. So that's got all the other gateways. And when we look at low-cost carriers in Europe, there's quite a few of them. In fact, there's a lot of them. I can fill up the screen here, but if you look at all these different airlines now, and have a look at the names of these airlines, this is just alphabetically from A to C. You still have from D to Z to go. So there's a lot of competition out there. And this, as we start to see the high cost of taxation, oil, etc., are going to play a significant role. It feels like we're being pushed further and further away from our traditional markets. And unfortunately, there's going to be no change in this trend for the foreseeable future. But when we look at international tourism, it was going to take January to June of last year. It grew on average by about 4.5%. And on this graph, you can see quite graphically the emergence out of the global financial crisis. You know, it's suddenly, at the end of 2009, jumped into positive territory. But if we look at it a bit more closely, you'll notice that that growth is coming from Asia and from the emerging markets around the world. In fact, those particular markets are growing twice as fast as the rest of the world right now. And again, that will continue, as you'll see in a moment. Tourism IVAs, or inbound visit arrivals for the Asian region then, are doing pretty well. In North Asia, 228 million arrivals last year, that's 4%. Southeast Asia, 82 million, 12% rise. South Asia, 10 million, etc. Last year, Asia produced 320 million inbound visitor arrivals, right on your doorstep. Is this an opportunity for the future? Quite possibly. The forecast for the next 2 years looks like this. Southeast Asia is going to grow 11%. That's huge. South Asia, predominantly India, 6%. North Asia, only 4%. But that's 4% of 228 million. North America, 3%. You know, the economy's struggling, the dollar's down, it's good value. And our own region, by about 2%. So again, quite graphically, you can see here where the future growth is going to occur. So when we look at these developing and emerging economies coming out of the global financial crisis, you can see the difference, again, quite graphically on here. Our traditional markets, the United States, Europe, and Japan, still struggle. And of course, Japan's been hit pretty hard for a whole number of reasons. But you'll see just the strength of the growth from the emerging economies, such as the Middle East, such as China, etc., such as India. They're going full steam ahead, and they will continue on that path. So when we look at the world economies for 2055, and that ain't too far away, I can tell you, you'll see now that China is the dominant economy, and India is number 3. So this is where the world is moving, whether we like it or not. We've reached that fork in the road. So it's up to us to determine from our business perspective how we want to move and how we want to shape it in the future. No wonder then that a lot of people are seeing the world like this. This is how it's going to be, or is it? Sure it is. So we're going to see this growth and this continued growth. How are people preparing for growth? I find this image quite interesting. This is Copenhagen Airport, little Copenhagen. Look at it, it's got all the signage and language. If you walk around Sydney Airport, you won't see any sign in language at all. We haven't even got to this stage. Yet the rest of the world is starting to understand and it's grabbing that opportunity, and we're still wondering about it. This here looks like ants, doesn't it? This here is a clock. It's a 24-hour clock of aircraft movements around the world. And you can see the saturation in North America right now. And as the clock moves into Europe, you'll see how dense Europe becomes. Look at Asia here, into China. This map is going to change quite dramatically in the next 10 years. What we're going to see is the whole of the Middle East, India, and China reflect what you're seeing in Europe right now, as aviation starts to crank up. In fact, it's already started to happen. In February 2010, IATA said that inter-Asia Pacific travel has eclipsed the number of travelers in North America as the world's largest aviation market. So we're already there. We're already top of the tree. All we've got to do now is grow. I thought I'd look at route access in this part of the presentation to Australia. This graph here, or this image here, is put together by DOTAS from Canberra, the aviation transport body. And in 2010, we had 6,282 schedules from Europe. Same period from Asia was 36,000. So again, when you start to look at opportunity, you start to look at what's going on in the world, just think of these numbers and start to think about where the future, where the opportunity lies.